Let's make underwear for a teenager to display under an original dress. Good day everyone, I'm Caitlin. I'm a living historian who educates other living historians by teaching old-fashioned sewing skills and copying original garments. We've been making a lot of children's underwear on this channel lately, at least for the past year or so. It seems like most of our videos are children's underwear, and we're doing it again. So it's been a year since I put on display the little blue girl's dress, and it is time for it to come off display. Originals really should not be on display for more than a year. 6 months is ideal, but I don't have enough to manage that. So this is a dress I bought last year. It is a super sheer. We've looked at it before a couple of times. Little teenager's dress. And so we're going to make underwear so we can display this. I have no idea what age child would have worn this. It's been a little bit of a struggle. She's an 18.25-inch waist, which is itty bitty for a child. The skirt is 36 inches long. So if I go by waist size, she's like preteen. Skirt length, she's not quite as tall as I am, but almost as tall as me, and I'm 5'3". And so I'm thinking she's probably just a smaller teenager. She has a bust because there are darts in here, and the darts do graduate. So she has a bust as well. So I think the best option is I'm going to buy a 10 to 11-year-old mannequin that is adjustable in height so that I can make her taller, probably around 5 foot. And then we are going to have to pad out her bust to give her some shape. We are also going to make a shaped corset for her. So just because she's going to have, not really as a super shaping one, but as you're starting to develop, you need some support right here. So we're going to be doing that today. So it'll be a little bit different than what we've done in the past. We are also going to make her drawers. We're going to make a chemise, a petticoat to go underneath. We're going to make her a crinoline, and we're going to make her another petticoat to go over top. That way we see, don't see anything we shouldn't see under the nice sheer fabric. So that is what we're going to be working on today. I have a lot of white cotton with me. So I'm going to go ahead and draft all of these patterns, and I will meet you over here to cut them out, and we'll get to sewing. Quick change of plan. So we've been doing so much drafting of my own under things that I figured I would like to teach y'all something else. And so, also I really didn't feel like drafting tonight. I realized that I have Elizabeth Stewart Clarke's Girls Under Things pattern. My friend Amy gave them to me, and they've never been used. I just cut them out of the pattern, like they've never been used. Her pattern line, it's hard to get at the moment because her website is down, but it's Historic Moments Patterns. She has patterns for children, so from infants all the way up to teenagers, boys and girls. And this will be the first time I'm using one of her patterns. But basically what I'm going to do is use a base pattern and create what I want. I'm looking at an original, image of an original for a girl about the age of 10. And I'm going to make this into that, even though these drawers aren't made to look like that. So I thought that could be our interesting thing that we learned this time. So first off, what I'm looking at, Mrs. Clarke has her drawers. There is no tuck up here, which the original illustration does have. Now her drawers are perfectly period correct. I'm just doing a different style. I want to make sure that's perfectly clear. Her stuff as is fine, but I want to modify it to be something different or slightly different. This is her finished lengths down here. So there's finished length, which is the 11. Looks like the original I'm looking at has about an inch hem. Her pattern calls for half an inch, so I would normally need to add half an inch to get that inch hem, but I'm going to walk you through it. I actually don't have to add any. There looks to be a little bit of an insertion, which I found a little insertion. It's not the best quality, but it'll work for museum things. It's basically just, I'm going to hide that part. It'll just be the dots. And that will add my half an inch, so I don't actually have to add any to the pattern. And then she says that there are 2 inches tuck allowance that is included, and those 2 inches will be on that top tuck that are on the originals. So I get to actually cut this out mostly as is. We're going to make some adjustments with, I guess, the construction. And I think I'm just going to cut it out of paper, that way I can have it. There are only going to be 2 changes I'm going to make, and I'm just going to draw this out. So as of right here, we're going to trace this out. And we're going to do it up to C. Just a little bit closer to that. Okay, about right here, I guess. Okay, right there. And then I'm going to do it on this side. This up. This is my hem line. All right, up here is where we're gonna actually make some changes. Oops. So I'm actually going to start with this, tracing this up. Okay. Now what I want to do is add a good 2 inches in this area because I want to add a tuck there. So what I'm going to do to make this a little bit easier is wherever I stop it here, I'm going to here, and I'm going to mark that spot on my pattern. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and add my 2 inches. This is why I like my graded paper. Okay. Take out my pattern piece. And I'm going to move my pin line over to this 2-inch mark now. Pin it back in. And go back to where, and go back up to where what I was doing. There we go. We're going to need to make a little adjustment here, but that's fine if it's the way it is right now. That goes here. Front waist C is here. And it gets connected like that, basically. And then on this end, it goes this way. Remember, usually people have a little bit more in the back, a little bit more rear end, so the back is always higher. So I'll put back, front, now I'm done with this. This is a really good skill because living historians, we don't have a lot of good patterns that are made for living historians that are accurate inside and out. As a result, the few that we do have tend to make us all look like cookie cutters, when in the actual 19th century there was a lot of variety. And so getting the skill to take a pattern base and modify it is an excellent skill. And it is less intimidating to most people than fully drafting it yourself. So if you've seen my drafting videos and you're like, that looks like a little bit more than I can handle, get yourself an accurate pattern and let's learn how to modify that. So I'm going to label this. In about 5 or 6 years, when I come out and I want to make this again, and I look at this pattern, I'm going to assume I drafted this and I might end up putting it as a pattern myself, and that isn't ethical. So I'm going to make sure I mark that it is not my pattern. The only other difference I'm going to do is that there is a little bit of a dip, like a little shaped waistband. So I'm actually going to end this front waistband here. It's not in the back, it's only in the front. So we're going to just connect, oops, that didn't work so well. Connect the dots. Okay, and I'm going to cross that out. Like a hole. Oh, there's a little bit of a hole. Okay. Now I can cut this out, and this is my drawers pattern. Alright, let's start with the chemise now. Mrs. Clark does give chemise options. The sleeve that looks like my original is actually just the pattern piece. So I am going to trace this out as before. I could use this actual pattern piece, but I like to keep my things together. So, you know, I don't panic and realize, you know, when I try to sew this again, I don't want to panic and not have what I need. Alright. The problem I'm going to have is the neckband because I don't have the mannequin to measure, but I can measure the neckline of the dress and make it a little bit bigger. We're at approximately 35 inches. What do I want to do about that? 35 inches exactly, which means I want it to be wider. Is 2 inches too wide if I cut it? It's 35 now. Is that enough? Let's cut it 38. So 38, I'm not even going to cut it 38. I'm just going to do half of it. Why not? 19 inches. I don't suppose this is 19 inches here, is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Look at that. And this is just a plain, very straight yoke here. I'm going to say that's about 3/4 of an inch. Which, so a seam allowance is going to be 3 inches. So let's just make a 3-inch wide. It's a fairly wide band. Alright. Now let's talk about the actual chemise. Actually, I'm going to need one more thing. My chemise has a placket, which means I'm going to need to cut 2 of those. Also means I'm going to have to do 2 buttonholes. That was a very poor decision on my part, but okay, here we are. That looks like it goes 1/3 down her body. If that's an inch, 6 inches, so let's cut it 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And it looks to be the same width, so I'm going to cut it 3 inches again. How long is this? Because it looks like it's actually about the length I want it. Maybe a little bit longer than I need. So, I would say about 28 inches would be fine. Oh wait, but I have the shoulder. Mine's different, has the shoulder. So this probably is right. So let's figure this out. And her largest measurement is a pretty decent sized bust, about 36. So I'm going to do a 1/4 measurement here. So if I end up doing a 36-inch wide piece of fabric, that means 18 inches would be across. One side is going to be the front, that's going to be on the fold, so I'll put that here. I'm going to need to slit down a little bit. This is the smaller seam allowance, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is what we said. Start stitching there, or rip for placket. This is my hem. It looks to be a fairly small hem, but if I did a 1/4 inch and then a 1/2 inch, fantastic. Okay. So this is where I need to work now. Now, Mrs. Clark, let's see, where does that go? That's a piece that you measure across. And it tells you like how far across to cut the armscye. I'm going to be doing part of that, and then I need to do something different with the actual armhole. So this is a little bit more curved of a seam than what hers is. Hers is a very straight, easy style, which is great, but I'm doing something a little bit more complicated. So I need to measure out, because there will be a seam down that chemise. And there's totally a gore on that drawing. About right here. We're going to curve that out like the original shows. And then I need to create a shoulder seam that's fairly narrow. It looks to be about 1 1/4 inches. So about 1 3/4 inches with seam allowance. So we'll say like right here. And then I can scoop it out. And I'm going to say this is not where that needs to go, because I forgot I need to scoop. And most of it's going to be on that line, but then as we get towards it, we're going to scoop it up towards that. So now this needs to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 here. Easy fix. Alright, I'm going to start cutting out. So I did not draft the corset. I ended up using my method. I didn't use Mrs. Clark's. Only because I need to do gussets. It's more like a corset for a young developing girl. So it's a little bit different than the stays that she had in her pattern. So I decided it was just easier to draft it than to change it that much. But here we are with this. So we're going to go ahead and cut out our chemise first. I'm cutting the front and back at each time, or at the same time, I suppose. And I got the chemise, I got all 4 gores, which is great, and the drawers waistband on here at the same time, which will be great. So I'm cutting both waistbands of the drawers. The back I don't want to have the point. So I'm just going to cut off the point on just one of those pieces in just a moment. And because it's not very much, I'll go ahead and cut out the back and I will cut out the front separately in a little bit. Let's first try the sleeves can go here for the chemise. This chemise base. Actually, I only need one of these, but the other one can be the drawers back. The other one can be the drawers. So we'll go ahead and cut them both. I'll have to cut the drawers down a little bit. I think this is probably a little bit too wide, but that is okay. You know what? For a light corset, I think drill would be better, but for a display corset, let's go ahead and just cut the corset and do 4 layers of this. Display corset, this is going to be fine because it doesn't need to hold up for all that. I have a few more things to cut out and then we can go ahead and start sewing. I think we're going to do this on the modern machine only because it is a lock stitch, which would be more common. I could absolutely use the 1870s machine for this, and it gives the same stitch, so it would be appropriate for this time period. But it's been a while since we've done something with a lock stitch, and I think I'd prefer that. So we'll go ahead and use a modern machine. All right, let's cut some skirt supports. So for her primary petticoat, which I'm not 100% sure that we need, but I'm going to go ahead and make it just so we have a full set of underwear. I'm going to cut it 27 inches long, and then we're going to do a good deep hem. So we'll put it at around 24 inches at the end. And I'm going to do 2 panels for this primary petticoat. All right, now let's figure out a crinoline situation. I'm feeling like I can draft today, so let's figure out what I want to do. Well, I guess I can do the other petticoat first. So the skirt is 36 inches long. I don't want this any more than 34. And if I do a nice hem, I think I'm going to leave this one plain as well. I want the sheer dress to shine through. I don't want anything underneath distracting from the original fabric. So I'm going to make this one plain. So if it's 36 inches long, I'm going to need 1/2 inch on either end. Or if I want 34, that would be 35. Let's do a 3-inch hem. So let's cut this one 38 inches long. And I will do 3 panels of this longer petticoat. Alright, I had to do some asking around. I realized I had never looked at teenagers' hoops before. This is a totally new thing for me. And I've never paid any attention to reading about the skirt circumferences, hoop circumferences or sizes or anything like that for teenagers. So I had to ask a couple of people. I asked Marta first, and she gave me some really good ideas. Well, okay, first I asked Susan, who had actually had a teenager while reenacting. I was like, hey, when your daughter was this age, what size was your crinoline? And so Susan went off to measure, and then I asked Marta. I was like, oh, Marta knows a lot about this time period. I actually asked her about restoration questions first, and then I asked her while I had her about hoop circumferences, and she suggested on the smaller side. She suggested about 75 inches to maybe 90 inches, but she said she'd stick closer to 80. And so I think that's what we're going to do. I think we're going to do about 80 inches, which means we're only going to need 2 panels of this. That'll make my life a little bit easier and take less fabric. One day we probably should do like an uncovered cage on this channel. I think all the kids stuff we've been making is covered cages. It's just easier to get the materials for that. So technically I went 10 inches on this bottom. And then all the way up here, I need it to be gathered. Obviously we want it gathered. I want it about her hip size, which I decided her hips are going to be about 25 inches. This is what, 8 layers? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So this is 1/8 of that. Seam allowance and everything. Let's cut everything about 4.5 here. So I have to now graduate it in a nice bell shape. Now we have all our pieces cut out, we can actually start sewing on this thing. Well, this very first step I'm doing is just taking the gores for the sides of the chemise and I'm sewing them together. Because remember, there were 2 gores for either side, so we had to sew them together. going to fell probably everything. My well-made underwear ought to be finished, and felling would be the most common. So I'm going to find out wherever the side is this best. And I'm going to cut just the one, not both, but cut just the one halfway off. And I have to decide whether I want to do this by hand or by machine. I like felling by hand a lot better, but I'm going to fold that in half and we're going to stitch that down. We may end up doing all the felling by hand. I don't have the time to fell it by hand, that's the problem, but it's going to look better and it's going to be less frustrating for me. And I think that's worth a little less sleep. And to be fair, I was the one who waited to the last minute to get all of this display stuff done. I have known we were doing a display this month for months, and I decided to wait till 4 days before we were all going to go and do it to realize that, oh, I'm dressing like 4 mannequins from the complete beginning. Okay, not complete beginnings. 2 of them from the complete beginning. One of them has and the other 2 have underwear done. So I knew this was coming. And I still waited. So this is my fault. This is the consequences of my lack of action. I really think I'm going to have way more fun felling this by hand. I am hand felling. So I did one of them. The other one's still attached to the sewing machine. And this is sewing the gore to the side of the chemise. Or at least to the side of one side of the chemise. And just as we discussed, so a straight side to straight side on the gore, if it's straight side of chemise to, I guess, triangular gored side of the gore. Now we're sewing the front to the back with the gores as well. And then at the same time, we're going to sew these nice little shoulder seams. Which I guess I could have put these on the fold, but that's okay. And that way I can have the whole bottom part, the whole body of the chemise done, and I just have to focus on the top part and the gathering and the sleeves and all that sort of fun stuff. And we are going to make this entirely untrimmed, mostly because it is going to be under a original and it's going to be on display. I don't think it needs to be pretty. Alright, so this is the felling part. So I'm taking that seam, again I cut off a good bit of it on the bottom, and I'm folding the one that's left in half to make it really small, and then we're whipping. Well, this is a felling stitch, but nowadays we call it whipping, a whip stitch. And we're just felling this down. It's a little bit of a struggle. I do better with, a little bit larger seam allowances, but I'm looking at a lot of originals and they have very small seam allowances for this type of thing. Most of them do. I've seen some larger ones. So this is me attempting to do a little bit better and being a little bit more typical with my sewing. It doesn't take terribly long. Of course, I'm pretty fast at hand sewing. And y'all can see how I do it. I just put my needle through and I don't pull my thread all the way through it each time because that just takes a little bit more time than I would prefer to take for every single stitch. So I go a series of stitches and then I pull everything through. And that saves me a little bit of time instead of having to pull my thread through every single time. Now, if I was doing this by machine, I would definitely have ironed what I'm doing with my fingers. I would have ironed that. I find it doesn't stay very well, and they never seem to be very even and pretty when I iron them as opposed to when I just stitch them down by hand, which is why I prefer to do this sort of thing by hand. And this is a perfectly period correct way to do it. I have original chemises in my collection. Some of them are completely hand sewn, some of them are completely machine sewn, and several of them have machine sewn interiors, and then all their felling is done by hand. Just because that's the way the seamstress preferred it, and I'm one of those seamstresses. I prefer felling by hand. I think it looks a lot neater and it's not as bulky and as stiff of a seam if you do it by hand, which is something I prefer. Now some people don't care. It's why we have originals that are completely machine sewn. I'm one of the people who actually cares, so this is how I do mine. But those are the gores. So now we have basically a chemise shell. I was going to hem this up, and I remembered we were doing a placket, and I forgot to cut a placket. So I'm going to cut a placket, and then we can start sewing in the placket. Trying to figure out, because I was going to do the hem first, but then I realized if I do the hem now, I had to go all the way to the other end of the house to get the iron, because that's where the iron and the ironing board are. They're in our closet. So it might be better for me to do as much as I can without the iron, and then do all the ironing at once. And I will need to press down the placket, so I should probably do the placket first. And I should probably do the sleeves first. That makes sense. So let's do everything I need to do before pressing, and then we go do the ironing. So I'm putting in the sleeve now, and we're filling it. So I can see a pretty clear seam on the outside of the garment, or I guess towards the chemise, not the sleeve. So that leads me to believe that's a felling seam. So I made a little bit of a larger seam just because that's what it looks like on the original illustration, which, you know, illustrations are not perfect, but we are trying to replicate it as closely as we can. And this is a post-war illustration that we're using, but these styles, children's garments do not change as fast as women's garments, especially in the underwear department. Dresses, yes, clothes, you know, outer clothes, sure. But inner clothes, they don't change, especially for children, as quickly as women's clothing does. So you can see these in the late 1850s. You can see similar ones in the earlier 1860s. So this is still a fine style. Okay, this is the bottom of the hem. I looked at the original, or at least one of the originals. It happened to be the first one I pulled that happened to have the machine sewn interior, but the hand felling, and it was hand done hem. So I chose to do it this way. There may be originals that have the hand done felling and have machine done hem. This one just happened to have it this way. It was the first one I pulled, and I decided, you know what, I'm not going to look into this any further. It's late at night. I have a couple of days to get like forward mannequins mostly completely dressed, and I have documentation for this. Let's do this. But I have already put in a gathering thread by hand, of course, at the front, or both fronts and the back. And I stitched in the placket. I haven't finished the placket yet. I think I'm going to do that by hand as well. See if I can find a placket over here. Here's one. And it's essentially the same stitch. And it looks like on the illustration that it's right over left. So, you know, right of the wearer over the left side of the wearer. So that's what we're doing with this one as well. Alright, I stitched this neckband on by machine. I'm going over with, you know, the same stitch we basically been doing this entire time, because this is a very popular stitch to use for finishing. So, and just pinning the putting the waistband down. And these on these ends, there's a variety of ways to put these together. I like to do a little bit of a whip stitch just to kind of whip them together. See, I have seen back stitches being used here. Trying to think of what else. I think there's at least one or two other ways. This is just my preferred method, so this is what I do because I've documented it and this is what I like to do. Alright, so there's that. Neckband is on. Sleeves are hemmed, whole thing is hemmed. I'm going to fix this little situation here. And by fix, I just mean stitch it down. So I'm going to fold that over very nicely to where there's no gaps or anything. And there's a lot of ways I could do this. Back stitching would probably be most appropriate. So that should stay in place a little bit better so it's not just flopping everywhere. We actually have a nice placket now. So I'm choosing mother of pearl buttons. They are a little bit on the small side, but that looks to be about what the original was. So let's set the buttons in first. Actually, I'm going to do a buttonhole very quickly. So this would be very helpful to have buttonhole scissors, but I don't know where mine are. I can't find what I usually use for buttonholes, so I'm going to be using this 100% cotton size 40 cotton pearl. It's about the same thickness as my buttonhole thread. So I don't think I'll show on camera the button being you put on, mostly because we will do a button and buttonhole on the drawers as well. We also have to do them on the petticoats and such. So I'm thinking that it would just be, to save time, sewing a button, sewing a buttonhole is the same on all the garments. So you'll see at least one, at least partial buttonhole. I don't know if I'll sit here the entire time and film this whole thing, because it does take a little bit, but yeah, you'll see a little bit at least of both of them. If you're new to the channel, I really hate buttonholes. I hate doing them. I think mine look terrible. I mean, I think they look pretty good most of the time. But then I compare them to originals and realize that mine are crappy. I always feel like I'm doing a good job, and then I look at originals. But there's also some originals that, look like mine. So it's not like this is wrong. It's just there's some really, really pretty original buttonholes sometimes that I get to see. And it's like, I would love to be able to do that one day. Like, this is so far a decent buttonhole. See, that looks pretty good. That's not bad for a buttonhole. Especially one of mine. Like, that's decent. I'm going to see if I can make the other one look like that. All right, let's do some drawers. So I have marked the top tuck. I have not marked the bottom one yet. I did double check, so hopefully it worked, that I have a right and a left leg. So we're going to hope this works. Sometimes I feel like a double and even triple check, and I still end up with two of the same leg. And I'm just sewing this little leg seam. This crotch area gets left open because these are open crotch drawers. And my next step for this is I'm going to cut off 2 inches off this hem. And there's a lot of ways you can do insertion. This is my preferred method. I like to cut it first. There are ways you can do it, there are other ways you can do it. And then we're going to sew the insertion on. After that, I'm going to do 2 felling seams. I have to fell this, and then I'm going to fell the insertion part and and that gives me something that looks like this. And so now I get to sew this part back on. I don't think I should have to do any felling on this side. I think everything should be covered by the hem. I think. And just like the chemise, I'm going to hand do the hem on these just for consistency purposes. Alright. So now that ought to give me an insertion. This is going to pull down that way so you can actually see the insertion. So it should look like that. This is a little bit finer of cloth than this. It would be nice if it was the same, but this will work. So yeah, I did cut that right. So we're going to fold this up a little bit here and fold it up and get my 3/4 of an inch hem. And then we'll do a tuck right here. I can't do the tuck up here until we finish this. I thought about doing the tuck first. I was like, oh, maybe we should do the tuck first. And then I realized this is a growth tuck up here. This is to be taken out. If I do it first, then I have to take out the binding up here to be able to take the tuck out and then re-put the binding on, which is a lot of work. And I think what would be more consistent and easier is to do the binding first, then do the tuck. And that way, when the child grows, theoretically, even though this is a mannequin, when the child grows, all you do is take out the tuck and it's longer. So that makes more sense to me anyway. So let's do a tuck real quick. This is the hem tuck. Pretty easy, to measure up. I just did a 3/4 of an inch to match the hem. I think to face the crotch, I'm going to cut some bias, so I should go ahead and do that. That way we can sew that on. I made a slight mistake, and however, we're going to take this, make something really cool, a really nice little nugget of history that no one is ever going to see, which is kind of a moot point, but it'll be fun. So I forgot how tall this young lady was when I started adding this tuck, because she doesn't need the tuck. She needs it to be as long as possible because she is a very tall young lady. Well, I shouldn't say very tall. She's on the taller end of her age range. Let's just put it that way. Anyway, so I don't need the tuck. But I'm going to sew the tuck. I'm going to sew the tuck. I'm going to press the tuck. I'm going to launder these things once, just because the cats have been all over them and they're about to go under original dress, so they need to be laundered. I'm going to press it again. And then I'm going to take out the tuck. And that way, underneath, you'll see the stitch lines. And no one is ever going to see this other than y'all. But you will know, if you ever see this dress on display, that there's a little nugget. Our child grew, and we had to let out a growth tuck. Because usually with these things, because the stitching is so tiny and dense, usually after taking it out, you can still see the stitch lines. Because I have come across original garments so that you can see where the tucks were let out. These are temporary growth tuck. And there's a tuck down there. See, they are dirty. I think the dog laid on them. So we will definitely need to launder these. Tuck, insertion, hem. And this one actually does have this already on it. I haven't shown you. I haven't done the other one yet. So I'll put that on by machine and then we'll come back and whip up whip up the bias. I'll probably gather these instead of doing pleats. So I'll gather them and we'll put them to a waistband. So this is the bias that we talked about, and I'm just stitching on. I'm not stitching it as nicely as, say, I would an actual filling stitch or a hemming stitch, because this was technically meant to be somewhat removable in the sense that once it gets worn, you would replace it with a fresh one. It'll help your drawers last a little bit longer, which is why I prefer this to just simply hemming it. I see this on originals. You also see just hemming it. I have a pair of original drawers that is half faced, half hemmed. Like, there's a couple ways to do this, but this is my preferred method. It's a shame this child is old enough to where her drawers really won't be seen underneath. Alright, so I'm working on the waistband. So what I've done is we're doing something a little bit different with the back of the waistband as per the original. You can somewhat see there's a little bit of a tape on the inside of the waistband. I think I made my waistband a little bit larger than usual. But there's a little bit of tape there, and there's a tie in the back, which I guess means I don't have to do buttons. Oh, that's super helpful, actually. I thought I had to do buttons and buttonholes. Well, we still had to do them on the petticoats. Anyway, so I made a little drawstring. This is typically how I see drawstrings done in the time period. I don't often see them where it's just like loose in the waistband itself. Usually there's something encasing the, tie or whatever. And I only did it from the back to here. So this will just fit. It's like a fine-tuned fit. I've seen a couple of originals like this as well, where the front is fitted, but there's a little bit of a drawstring in the back. This is especially common, it seems, on young children, teenagers, young adults, people who are, young people who are still growing. This is where I see this a little bit more. And so what I'm doing is trying to pin this all nice and neat. What I need to do first is get this, because this needs to be folded under, which means this doesn't need to come out here. It needs to come out like right over there. So I'm going to put this into a yarn needle, fold it to where I want it to go, and then I can just stick this right out, and that comes out exactly where I need it to go. So now I get to do the sewing, and I guess I don't have to do buttons and buttonholes. That's very helpful. I'm going to do whip stitch here. I thought about doing a back stitch just to show you the difference, but maybe on the petticoats, because I don't want to back stitch over this, obviously, and I can better control what I'm catching and skip that area. Probably going to do a double stitch or maybe even a triple stitch on either end of this tie, just because that will get a little bit of stress. So now I'm going to go across here, putting the back of the waistband on all the way across, and then this will be done because we don't have to do buttons and buttonholes. That we are sewing the pieces together. I realized that I'm so used to doing like small children's stays that I forgot that this is like supposed to be a crossover between adult and children's stays. So I forgot to shape it like under the arm and over the back a little bit. So I cut a new piece. I also somehow ended up with like a super tiny waist. I think I did way too much subtracting at the waist. So when I sewed up the first draft, it was like each side had like a 5-inch waist, which would have put it like a 6-inch waist. And like that would have put it at a 10-inch waist, which for a 19-inch waist is like, that's not enough, clearly. Even with a little bit of a gap, it shouldn't be that much. So this is draft 2, where I actually cut them correctly, I hope. So this is what we're doing. I do have one gusset in. I'm going to put the second gusset in pretty close to that. But right now I'm just sewing together the pieces. The way I do this is I take all the pieces. I have 4 of them, 4 of each piece. Because there has to be right and a left, but there also be lining at the same, pieces. So there has to be 4, and I just go straight from piece 1, and I sew it to piece 2 on all of them, and then I take piece 3 and sew it to all of them. It helps keep me a little streamlined, and it helps me remember how many rights and how many lefts I already have, so I don't end up with too many of one side. I don't know, a little conga line here, I guess. And I just cut off the last one when I'm ready to sew the next piece to it. And then when I run out of pieces to sew, that means I'm at the end of a line and I can go grab the next set of pieces to sew. I just find this to be the most streamlined. After getting all the pieces sewn together, I'm sewing I guess the sides together. So I'm not having a center front opening with this one. It's just going to be like a one-piece stay. What you see on kids' clothes. So it's one of those things that we're making more like a child's corset instead of a front opening bust, because I don't actually have a front opening bust that's this short and I don't have time to get one, so this is fine. And so I sewed 2 halves together and then I sewed the other 2 halves together, and now I'm sewing both of those together on the front or on both backs. So when I turn it right side out, you see, pretty side and pretty side, which I have to iron all of these seams. I'm thinking I'm going to bone this. I'm going to lightly bone it. I'm thinking 1 bone on each seam, which would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bones. Maybe 1 or 2 in the center back, and then we're gonna do everything with German plastic whalebone. We're not gonna do any steel in this. This is still a child's corset. And then I need something down the center or in the middle. And I don't know if I have to bone any more of the bust line. I think that 1 in that seam is going to be enough. The other thing I did, because her waist is so sharp, I did clip in that waist. That way whenever I iron it and pull it back out, it's not going to pucker. So now we have a little corset put together. I'm going to sew the boning channels. So again, I'm doing 2 on the back, so it's going to be bone, grommets, bone, 1 in each of the 3 seams. Actually, I guess there's 4 seams. No, 1, 2, 3, and then the center. There'll be an extra one in the center. I do have to figure out exactly how I want to do the one here. And I don't know if there ought to be one. I'm going to see, because she's young. This isn't exactly a large cup size. Usually the smaller cups, they don't need any extra support. Like mine, I'm not super huge, but mine are heavy. And so I have to really support my bust area. And I'm doing the bone around the seam. So there's a seam in the middle, but because these aren't actually sewn together, there is a channel in there, so I can just sew or put the boning in there. So it's putting in boning. So this is what I'm using. This is I think 1/4 inch German plastic whalebone, so it's super flexible, like no effort whatsoever, and it's just pushes right back into shape. So great for all manner of corsetry. Top looks good. So we ended up doing pretty well. I think we'll be about 1 inch gap on her. So it's about 18 inches. So yeah, there'll be about 1 inch gap, which is fine. That's a little less than I would care for, but on a child, you kind of want a smaller gap because you know they're going to grow and they will get a bigger gap. And then what do I have her hips as? I have to make the mannequin, so we decided it was cheaper than buying an actual mannequin. So I get to make the mannequin whatever size this needs to be. So her hips are going to end up being about 24, well, I'll probably make them 25, which is what I planned on making them. And then let's see what her bust line is up to. It's going to be 28, I would guess, to 29, which means I'd cut it 30. Yeah, perfect. It's exactly what I planned on, so that's great. So at least this corset turned out right. It just took me 3 times to get the measurements right. Yeah, I'm going to bind this, and then there's no bust to put in. It's just we got to do the grommets. All right, grommets are in. We're going to lace the corset, and I'm hoping I gave plenty of lacing because the idea is for it to be quite loose where I can put it over the head of the person or the mannequin instead of having to lace every single time, which does get, a little annoying. Okay. All right, now I think what I'm going to do is make both petticoats at the same time, and then at the very end we will do the crinoline, because I don't need to measure the underskirt over the crinoline or anything like this. I've already decided what size I want for that, so I think easiest bet anyway will just be to do the petticoats at the same time. I'm not going to bore you with too much petticoat sewing, as it's mostly straight panels. So I'm going to sew both of them. Obviously there's a 2-panel petticoat and there's a 3-panel petticoat. On the 2-panel petticoat, I'm going to sew both sides completely. I'm going to cut a slit into one of them, and that is going to be my back opening. And I will just probably hand him that because it'll look nice and it'll match the rest of them. And I probably will hand him these as well. Hand gather them and we'll stick them to a waistband. On the larger petticoat, the underskirt, I did 3 panels, and so I can sew up 2 entirely, and on that back one I can leave a little opening, and that way I don't have to cut a slit into that one. It just prevents you from having a center front seam, which is not seen as desirable. And both of these petticoats are very easy to sew, simply because they are completely untrimmed. We are just making basic petticoats. Alright, I've done the gathering. This is the hemming, which I very well could have done this by machine, but again, I like the look of a good hand-done hem, and I don't know, maybe I'm avoiding the rest of the work I have to do the next 3 days to get everything else that I need to get done complete. So I'm taking my time with this. And then we're going to gather it up, put it on a waistband. I'm hoping I made these stitches small enough. I already gathered up the, or large enough I guess, I already gathered up the smaller petticoat. And it was a little bit of a tight fit with those gathers, but I also made the gathering stitches smaller on that one than I did on this one, because this has a whole extra panel in it. But we're going to finish this, tie this off real quick, and then go ahead and stitch on the waistband of the smaller petticoat. I have it pinned, I don't have it sewn. And I'll catch this one up off camera, and then we can finish the waistbands. And I wanted to do it from this back side so I can keep everything in place. I find when I go from the front side with a lot of gathers like this, sometimes things like to get a little turned around. Alright, let's put on this button. This is the final petticoat. And then we will work on crinoline, which we did cut out, so I'll just have to sew that together and put in as many boning channels as I can stand to do today. Alright. That's almost everything done. We just have one more piece. Okay, I thought I made that buttonhole too big, but actually that's the perfect size. That's great. These are the rungs for the hoops. I was really hoping to fit in 6 at least. I started doing them 5 inches apart, thinking that would be plenty of space, and turns out it's not. So we're doing 5 hoops, which is not great, but it should still give a fine shape under crinoline, and for a mannequin it should be fine. So I sew one end and then I sew the other. I'm trying to keep all of the, I guess, joins in the same spot so that it's easy to put the hoops in without figuring out each time where the opening is to get that hoop in there. My next step is to figure out where I want the center back, cut a little slit, finish that, and then we're going to gather in the top, which is going to be very lightly gathered into a waistband, at which point I can actually start putting in the crinolines, or the hoops, rungs, whatever, the wire bits, or the metal bits at least, and that'll be, well, I guess I had to do a closure, which I'll look back on, see. I know we've done very lightly gathered waistband, but we're going to go ahead and sew this on. I ran on bottom through it. I knew it was going to happen. hoping I'd get this last little bit done. That's okay. You know, I really considered, there's one of our roosters. I really considered doing this slit by hand because I was like, you know what? I bet if I did it by hand, I'd have enough of the machine to finish the waistband. And I thought, nah, it'd be fine. I knew it. I knew I wasn't going to have enough. So, should have listened to my first inkling there. But that's okay. It's white thread. I'm going to be using a lot of white thread this week, so it's fine. It's all fine. We're doing a hook and eye closure here. It's all one or two originals that look like they were hook and eye. And so I had some really small hooks and eyes that I was like, you know what, this will work for this. I only had 3 of them. Alright, I like to do this part before I put the hoops in, because once the hoops in, this gets a little bit unwieldy to try to sew in. So I like to put the waistband in first. But now I can start measuring for hoops. I'm going to turn this right, or inside out, I suppose. Might as well start from the top here. I'm going to measure the rung. So I'm going to make that about 54 inches. Usually once you get it started, it goes in pretty well. Sometimes I find I have to put tape on the hoop rung to get it to slide in there easier, but sometimes I don't. And I did try to make sure that my seams are facing that way so that it would be easy to just push the hoop in. I got it most of the way through. Let's just get, there we go. I think I got it. Usually it's just you have to keep feeling it through. And I can relax a little bit. Alright, so we have hoop number 1. Now it gets to be a little bit unwieldy. So I'm going to continue with this. Now that you've seen how one gets put in, the others get put in the exact same way. Alright, and I was so busy trying to get everything done for the display that I forgot to film the ending to this video while I had all the clothes in the house. So here's just some footage of the getting dressed portion that you see a little bit from the short, of course, but it's just, you know, not sped up, a little bit more of the footage, that sort of thing. The mannequin was a little bit wobbly, but we did manage to make her work. But yes, yeah, that's all the underpinnings. They turned out really great. They fit the mannequin really well, which was nice because I could make the mannequin fit the clothes. Typically you fit clothes to the body, but I was able to do it the opposite, fit the body to the clothes. And I think I did a pretty decent job. The clothes will absolutely work for a child somewhere in that 10 to 12, maybe 13-ish range. This child was a little bit more developed. She may have been a little bit older. She may have been in the 15, 16 range. So she could be in that lower teens range, which would also fit with her height as well. But a lot of these clothes would fit that as well. The styles don't particularly change, so that works out just fine. Whether she's 10 or she's 15, again, the styles don't change a whole lot. A lot of it was just getting things to fit her. But it looks really good under the dress. You know, for display, you really don't have to have that many underpinnings. You can get away for display. A lot of them, there are underpinnings that are for comfort, and then there are underpinnings for structure and shape. And not all of, and some underpinnings serve both functions. So really for display, all you really have to have is the corset and the skirt supports of some kind. You don't have to have the chemise, drawers, the under petticoat. Those are more comfort underpinnings, as in with all the other layers, wearing and actually functioning in them, you need those layers to be comfortable or to be, you know, sanitary, but you don't necessarily need them for display. But again, I like to use them for display. Overall, I am quite pleased with the project. It turned out really well. It fits under the dress well. It sets off the dress very well. It's one of the reasons I wanted plain petticoats and basically white everything. I wanted the underpinnings to be as plain as possible so that the dress could shine through, and I think we accomplished that, and everything fits and works really well. So thank you so much for joining me today as we made underpinnings for a mannequin. If you have enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe to the channel, click that little bell notification so you're notified anytime I upload a new video, and as always, have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here in the next video.